Well, hey there, it's Jamie J. We are live with Bottleneck now. We'll be coming to you and introducing you to Dan Norenberg here. Just after the 38-second intro, I'll introduce him to you, and then we're going to start talking about how to stop the bottleneck in your business. So bear with us, stay tuned, and we'll be right back with you in about 38 seconds. Hello. My name is Jamie J. I'm the CEO and founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance. This is not why we're here today, but we are here to help you stop the bottleneck in your business. And I am very honored to welcome Mr. Dan Norenberg. He's the CEO of Catalyst Executive OWERSHIFT. And we're going to be talking about signature strengths of highly effective leadership teams and why, oh, why is Dan able to help you stop the bottleneck in your business? Well, let me tell you. Dan is an advisor, coach, and consultant to leadership teams who strive to play at their best. He had worked with over 100 leadership teams on 3 continents. His book, Executive OWERSHIFT, I love that name, by the way, Creating Highly Effective Leadership Teams, gives an insider view of how leaders and their teams can fast track to success. And if you know me at all, you know what culture means to me, what leadership means, leading with kindness, team development. That is all a very, very instrumental aspect of how we grow our business here at Bottleneck. So I cannot wait to dive into this. So make sure your pencils are sharpened. If you have any questions or comments during our conversation, as this is live, please don't be afraid. Come on in and ask questions. Dan is a super nice guy. He's not going to hurt you at all. So come on in and ask your questions. If you're watching this in a replay, simply ask your questions away, and I will do my best to make sure that Dan receives all of those inquiries. So thank you so much. Without any further ado, please welcome Dan Norenberg. How are you, sir?
I'm terrific. It's great to be with you this afternoon, your time, evening, my time, Jamie.
That's correct. Yeah, and you're in Munich, huh?
Yes. This
Wow.
is home.
So how is it? How's everything going there right now?
It's not probably too different than where you're part of the world right now. We're sort of still dealing with the COVID stuff, but coming into spring and still masking up and staying positive and testing negative and looking forward to moving out of this thing. But we're all doing our part and we're all in it together, and we'll all come out of it together. So it's a pleasure to be here and exchange with you today.
Oh, I love that. I like that too. Testing negative, staying positive.
Yeah, there you go.
I haven't heard that one yet. So I'm wondering if for those of any of my audience that has not heard of you before, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're up to and kind of what you like to do.
Yeah, well, I'm actually from the Midwest. I grew up in Iowa, and I studied there, went to high school, went to college, and when I finished, I headed to California. I had a background in psychology and criminology. I wanted to be a lawyer, but I thought perhaps some business experience would be helpful. I spent 10 years in California working with technology companies, and I found that I sort of really found my love and passion working in sales and marketing, primarily sales. And the companies I were with were really fast-growing, explosive growth companies, so I was at a very young age managing others. Not too well, I must say, but at least that was my first leadership experience. And when that company went out of business, we were doing photovoltaics, producing electricity from sunlight. When the company went out of business, I just said, I've had enough, I need a break. I'd sold my house, packed everything up, and took a backpack and went to Europe for 2 weeks. And just to sort of clear my head to think, what's my next big thing before I came back to California? And make a long story short, that 2 weeks has turned into 30 years, and here I am in Munich.
Wow.
So of course, arriving in Germany and just saying, I'm going to make a go of this for a little bit. I didn't speak a word of German. I didn't know a single person, and I didn't even have a legal right to stay here. But I found that by becoming a coach, trainer, particularly being mother tongue English, being here in Europe, that I could get a pass to stay, as a freelance consultant. So I spent 4 years with the Siemens organization, first class global organization, German based, but global worldwide. And I worked in their learning and development group for 4 years. And they sent me to the UK to work. I worked in France and did a lot of work in Germany on team building and communication skills, sales training, negotiation. And I've got to thank Siemens because they're really a first-class organization when it comes to learning and development. And after 4 years, they offered me a full-time job, which is what most people aspire for. But I thought, maybe there's life outside of Siemens. So then I founded my own coaching and leadership training company, and I ran that for 25 years.
Oh my
and we focused on talent development, primarily with European companies, some businesses in the States and in Asia. And over the course of 25 years, we worked with about 20,000 people, worked in 23 different countries, and with 76 different nationalities. And it was during that time that I started getting involved with leadership teams, which is an animal that ticks a little bit differently. And that's my full-time role right now. So I'm married, I've got 2 kids, and a lovely life here in Munich, which is a little bit like Iowa. Because it's quite out in the country, but it's also got a little bit of California in it because it's quite international as well.
Wow, what an incredible story. And kudos to you for sticking out there. That's amazing.
Well, it sounds like a really exciting, cool story now, but I can tell you, Jamie, along the way, I was, scared to death, because you're just putting yourself out there. You don't speak the language. You don't have work papers. You don't know anybody. But it just is, again, it's a reminder of what happens when you follow your heart. And I wouldn't be fair if I tried to take all the credit myself, because as you know from starting a business and working with people, so many people came out of the woodwork to help me and support me, and everything from show me the way in German when I didn't speak it, to helping me learn it, to give me opportunities to show my skills and what I could do with my experience that I brought over from the States, which was somewhat unique. So I'm really, really grateful to all those people and organizations that gave me a shot, and I try to do that now. So if I ever hear of anybody that's in Europe that says, "Oh, I want to make a go of it here," I'm the first one to invite them for a coffee or take them for a beer or something like that, because you got to pay back, you got to pay forward what people have paid to you. So anyway.
Oh, that's brilliant. And so I'm assuming you speak German fluently now.
Well, I'd say my wife still corrects me from time to time, but my private life is almost exclusively German. So all our friends and weekends and stuff like that is German. I've always worked in English because primarily my work population is the multicultural group. So a leadership team there might be 3 Germans, 2 French guys, an Italian, somebody from Mexico, maybe 2 US guys. But the thing that bonds them together, the lingua franca, is English. And so English has always been my language of work, and German's been my language of my private life.
Good for you. That's fantastic. That is fantastic. So a plethora of questions are coming to my forefront here in my brain. But one in particular is, I definitely want to talk about your book and things like that. But before we get there, coming over from the States, if we go back, and then you decided to get a job with kind of coaching at Siemens or team development.
Yeah.
Did you have an interest for that already? Like, was that something that you already had experience in, or was that just like an opportunity and you said, yeah, I'll try that?
That's a great question. I mean, that's a really good question. It's like helping people develop their latent skills. Like, I always had a passion for learning. My father was a high school principal, was a football coach. My mother was an elementary school teacher. So some kids grow up sitting on a tractor. Other people go to the factory every day with their dad. And I used to go to school. And, my father loved education, was really into it. My mom loved it too. And so I was just always around schools. And I come from Iowa, and we've got good school systems up there. And so I always had this interest in learning and stuff like that, but I didn't want to be a teacher. And as a manager in California and a sales director, I always had a training function. I was always interested in training. On the weekends, I was what you might say a seminar junkie, going off to learn the next thing about negotiation or selling or strategic selling or spin selling, whatever it was, so I could bring it back and introduce it to my team. So there was always a function of learning or training in my line management role. But it is a different thing when you're, then full stage on there as a profession. So I did have a little bit of background there.
Oh, well, okay. That's interesting. And so when you came over, started working there, you went through Siemens, and it's ironically, I have a friend here that works at Siemens,
Cool.
and not too far away from here. And he's been working there for about 30 years, I think.
It's a
And
great company.
he said the same thing. He absolutely loves
Yeah.
the company. So
Yeah.
that speaks volumes. To leave security like that and go out on your own, how did you do that? What was your mindset going through that process?
Well, that's a question. I got to back up a little bit, because it sounds as if I just kind of skated over to Germany and then suddenly I walked in Siemens' front door, this multi-billion-euro company. And they said, "Oh, you're Dan Norenberg from California. Wow, we've been waiting for you." It didn't happen like that, Jamie. So we shouldn't. So I don't want 60 people tomorrow, like, showing up at Siemens' door from somewhere in the States saying, "Norenberg did it, so I can do it." I mean, the reality of it was there were two turning points, and I just share them because I think it could be really important for the listeners who also might be through those turning points. I was in Paris actually at the close of my holiday, and I was thinking about going back to the States, although I was kind of touched by Europe and particularly Munich, and thinking, what would it be like to spend a little bit more time here? I was single, I didn't have any kids, I didn't have a job, I didn't have a piece of real estate, so it was playing with my mind. But all those things of security and fear, and what would I do, and how would I get it set up, was bothering me. And I was staying with a friend in Paris, and the second to last night before I was supposed to fly back to the States, I had this incredible epiphany. I mean, like a dream that was so real it woke me up from my sleep. And I dreamt that I was 80 years old, and I was looking back at my life, and I saw my life at that time, in Paris, getting ready to fly back to the States. I saw myself back in California, pushing the lawnmower with 2.5 kids, 2.5 cars, and being a pretty happy camper. However, I was thinking, gee, Dan, when you're 80, are you ever going to regret that you didn't spend more time in Europe? Will that haunt you at some point in your life? And that was such a horrific thought. The person I was staying with, she was used to date my best friend who died of cancer at 30. So there was a lot of premonition there, and a lot of thinking, like, how do I want to live my life? And I don't want to live life with regret. That's one of my non-negotiables. That's really important for me to not regret something. And so I'm sensitive to that feeling when it feels like it could be. And so when I was supposed to get on that plane and go back to Los Angeles, I didn't. I went to the train station in Paris and bought a one-way ticket to Munich, and came to Munich and landed with, so that was kind of just a little bit of so it wasn't just like skating into Siemens. And then the story was, I started looking for work thinking, well, I've got this marketing sales background. I'm going to contact German companies doing business in America and American companies doing business in Germany. And at that time, this was 30 years ago, you could stroll into the U.S. consulate. I mean, and they had a commercial library. This is like just right on the pre-dawn of internet. So I could go into the commercial library there at the U.S. consulate, take my sack lunch. I was just living there. I mean, I was there for weeks. I was there every day for 6-7 hours. And that's when I got the call from Siemens. And the guy says, "Are you the American that's living at the consulate?" And I said, "Well, I don't spend the evenings here, but I do spend most of my days here." And they said, "Well, would you speak at one of our guest events about, doing business in America and things like that?" And that was still a little bit of a novelty at that time. This is like early 90s. And so I started as a guest speaker.
And that's when they still had the Deutschmark.
They still had the Deutschmark. Yeah.
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 Wow.
And so that was really the beginning. And then after those speaking engagements in the evening, that was in conjunction with this learning and development team. And I thought, boy, that looks pretty exciting. And they said, well, you've got a great business background. You don't have any really accreditation as a trainer, so to speak, and Germans are really keen on that accreditation and stuff like that. But they saw you got 10 years of business experience. You know how to negotiate. I've always been quite a pragmatic guy, and really getting people into doing stuff, and that's where you can really learn. And that became the door opener into Siemens, which was a tremendously wonderful and rich experience for me.
Well, thank you for the background on that, because it sounds like a lot of the things that's leading up is you're figuring out ways to introduce new ideas or new concepts at each stage of your career. I guess you could say it, and that kind of blends in nicely when you talk about signature strengths of highly effective leadership teams. Yeah. Because one thing that I know about leading teams is you have to remain relevant in order, and you have to be respectful. in order to get respect back. But being up, you said you went to, all these different events so that you could learn new stuff. And I think that's part of being a good leader. But I wonder if maybe you could tell me a little bit more about finding out what those strengths are of effective team leadership.
Yeah, and if I may, let me just back up just a step, because I think it's important when we talk about leadership teams. This is something that we use these words quite often, but I think it's important to look at what's unique and special and important about leadership teams. These teams that are at the top of the organization, they're surrounded by a lot of power, a lot of pressure. There's a world of things to do when you walk into the C-suite. These guys they've got 1,000 things that they could dig into, but they can only do 2 or 3. So they're constantly trying to shuffle that out. And there's an urgency to deliver results. So I'm talking about maybe the executive team or the strategic leadership teams. A lot of this is still applicable to very small businesses too. Actually, it's very applicable to small business. But what often happens is, what I noticed when I started working with these very senior leadership teams is that they often forgot to practice the oxygen mask rule. And that is that because there's so much pressure, and because there's so much to do, and because the organization is on fire, and because they have an orientation to action and results, that they would often jump into the issues in the business and work on those, and they would neglect, let me say, the team health. They didn't identify the guidelines and things that a team needs to do to ensure that they're healthy and robust and able to be highly effective. So they were solving problems in the business, but they weren't, as a leadership team, say, working at their highest potential. And when the senior leadership teams aren't playing at their best, nobody else in the organization can either. So I think that's the important thing to keep in mind, first of all. So anybody that's in a team got to think that. How are we taking care of ourselves? Do we have guidelines that orchestrate how we work together, how we deal with conflict, how we communicate? And the second thing is, just on that point, is that most of today's organizations have, fairly thorough and mature leadership development programs, from first-time leader going on up. And what's interesting is that nearly all the leadership programs are built around leadership as an individual activity. That is, the leadership models, the inventories, and the interventions are all built around leadership as a sort of heroic leader. And there isn't a lot of support for these senior leadership teams to support their team of leaders concept, if you will. And I just feel that, this is what we've used for the last 50 or 60 years to develop leaders, but I think that we're spending too much time coaching players where we should be coaching teams, because it's teams of leaders that drive the results in the business. So that's number one. And team building is something that's quite common throughout many organizations, but it's usually at the, let's say, lower levels of the business, or the, let's say, strategic levels of the business. And what I encountered initially was this idea of, like, if you talked about, well, how we're going to build a better team at the very senior level, or that might help you guys be more effective so you can help others. What you often hear is, we're too busy, we don't really need it. But the reality is, very often they were reluctant to maybe share their shortcomings, or where they were struggling in front of their colleagues, So I don't know what your experience is.
Why do you think that is? I'd be curious to hear why you think that, why they'd be afraid to share their shortcomings.
Well, I'm also interested in your thoughts too, but let me just say, I'll give you mine, and then I'll say, we're coming from a leadership practice, if we look back 30, 40, 50 years, where command and control was not seen in the past as necessarily a negative thing. Business moved at a certain pace. The people at the very top were the most intelligent. They sort of commanded what should be done and how it should be done. And then people did it, the queen bee and the worker ants. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but if we go back pre-internet days, things moved at a different pace. You mailed a letter, you got the order, you fulfilled it, the manufacturers made it, and you sent it, and everything worked at a nice pace. Now, the complexity of the business issues are so much more. So I think that we're moving in this command and control scene. People sort of came off as being the almighty, and being really knowing it all, knowing it best. And maybe at that time, it's changing now, but being a bit masculine, not wanting to show vulnerability, which is really fundamental to this team of leaders concept. If you can't show where you're vulnerable, where you're struggling, how can your colleagues help you? So I think it's about I think this vulnerability piece is by some interpreted as a weakness or not being competent, which it's not at all. And I think that's where some of that is. But I see a lot of teams that don't experience that, and they're willing to lay their stuff on the table, and then others are eager to help them,
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of my sketch on that. What do you think?
So I think one of the biggest reasons that people don't lay it out on the line is because they feel inferior and they feel that they're dumb and they're going to make a mistake and that someone else will laugh at them. It's just an uncomfortable feeling. And I've experienced that firsthand in corporate America when I worked for corporate America, and I was I was deathly afraid. I was actually told by my general manager not to ask any questions when the bigwigs came into town, and only speak if you were asked a question. And here's your little card with the mission statement and all of the questions they're probably going to ask you.
Yeah. And of course, that's not a real growth environment. That worked in some industries some of the time way back when. But today, in this very fluid, business environment where there's a huge amount of complexity, well, even the smartest guys at the top can't manage all the complexity in their organization now. And then you've got the speed of business today, and then you've got this wonderful diverse work culture, which we're all trying to figure out how do we tap in and get engagement and ownership and identity with all these people who maybe have grown up in different environments. How do we align that?
Love that.
And I know you're big on that culture piece. So I think that so at the top it's become, if I may say so, a bit archaic, where obviously you still need a strong CEO. She still needs to make the call when she thinks necessary, or he, whoever that is. But I think this standalone CEO with a bunch of people in the leadership team that simply carry out what they think is sort of a way of the past. And I think the big breakthrough businesses are those that double down and invest in leadership development as a team construct, not only as an individual activity.
Yes, I'm virtual high five right there. I totally agree with that. So we're getting close to come to the end of the half hour, but I have two more questions. Number one, what is one of the first things you do when you make an evaluation when coming into an organization to begin the team development?
Well, two things. I'll give you two. One is, when I can, I like to observe a management meeting, because one of the signature strengths, and we won't talk about all in the day, but we'll talk about a couple. One of the signature strengths for highly effective leadership teams is, making meetings matter. And people say, oh, meetings, that's kind of fundamental. Isn't that kind of elementary? Well, I don't care what sport you're talking about: baseball, football, hockey, field hockey, soccer. All the big guys, all the pros, men and women, they all start with the fundamentals at the beginning of the season. And if you're an executive team, one of my first questions is this the best meeting in the company? Is your meeting the gold standard for everybody else? Because the meeting sets the culture for the whole organization. How that meeting runs is how the culture runs. Meeting starts late, projects end late. So one of the things I do is, I want to get into a meeting because I can really see what's happening in the culture by what's happening in the meeting. And the second thing I do when they ask me to work with them, then I do something which I call a perception consolidation. So I'll have it's not really an interview, it's more of a conversation with all the members of the leadership team. It's confidential, and I do have a good way of getting people to open up with me, and they're assured that it's going to be anonymous, but I'll have these conversations which will go for an hour. I've had over 1,000 conversations with senior executives in the last 10 years, 1,000. So all these patterns sort of show up. It's fantastic. And I love people anyway, so they've all got a story to tell. But they'll also share what they think is not working, or what they're disappointed with, or maybe where they don't feel respected, or where they feel that strategy doesn't have the punch that should have. And with their permission, in an anonymous way, I put those conversations in an anonymous document called a perception consolidation. And that becomes the introduction to the work we do as a team. So all the things that were under the table and not spoken
kind of come out
when they come up. And we know that and another signature strength is developing resilient relationships. So if you don't have resilient relationships in the senior leadership teams, then you can't really tackle strategy in a meaningful way. You can't run good meetings. You can't give good feedback, and the rest of the organization will parallel you. And so I like that perception consolidation. And I don't know, to take you back to your German a little bit, I love the German word for perception, because it just describes the situation. The German word for perception is Wahrnehmung. It's two words, wahr, which means truth, and nehmen, which means take. So when we do a perception consolidation, you and I might be in the same podcast here, the same lived-in thing, but you might be thinking one thing and I might be thinking another, just because of our backgrounds. So the idea is to bring these different perceptions together in a document so they can discuss that, and to realize that, oh, I thought everything in the team was fine, or, oh, I didn't realize some people are really upset, and that begins cooking the soup for a meaningful exchange. How do we develop relationships so we don't have to put that in a document, so we can say that to each other and then fix it and move on?
I love it. I think that's fantastic. It's the best way is to, it's in sales too. In sales, you market the problem. Yeah. You don't market the solution, you market the problem. It's much the same way that I'm understanding there. I think that's great. And that's a great word, by the way, Vademo. And then the second question that I had was, at what point and what type of organization, at what point do they say, I need to go speak to Dan, or, where are they? What kind of organization is it that says, we need to speak to Dan? How do they know that there's an issue?
Yeah. Fair question. Well, I think the situations that I'm most often, and I think there's two parts of this work. Part of my work is, how do I work with teams on the ground to help them get better? And the second part, my mission in life now, and this is really my mission for the next 10 years, is how do I bring leadership as a team construct more into the reality? There are a handful of people like me around the world that do more of a exclusively team construct stuff as opposed to individuals. I'm not saying the individual stuff is not good. However, I think now we need the other. So the three situations where I'm often asked to come in is where there's a new leader, taking over, that could be a executive team, but it also could be head of supply chain. A guy takes over a plant, a woman takes over a new plant. She's the new plant leader. Maybe she's come from within, then she's got to deal with maybe some peer factions, or maybe she's come from the outside. So a new leader, particularly with a new company, I'm like an insurance policy to help them really accelerate their success. That would be number one.
You can help them with, but that's the way we've always done it here, kind of thing.
Well, that's not why the new leaders come in, usually. Usually. And I've never known anybody that got hired for any job, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never known anybody that's ever got hired for a job and said, you're hired, we love you, we're going to give you a nice salary, and by the way, keep everything like it is.
Yeah.
Don't change a thing. That's part of the nature of bringing a new person in. So one is a new person role. The second is, which is quite common, is, imagine a company, it could be any industry. So I'm not particular to any industries, which I really appreciate, because I learn a lot from working with different industries, and it's more about the process orientation I'm working with. But a company that's been successful for perhaps many years, or several years at least, they've been leader of the pack. And then suddenly, over the course of 12 or 18 months, they start to shift back into the middle, and they don't like it, and they don't know why. And I've had several situations like that, and most commonly what we'll see is why they've slipped back is, A, they've either taken their eye off the customer, or B, they've done perhaps one or two mergers or internal reorganizations, and they've taken their eyes off the outside. So that's the second area. And the third area is when, a senior leader will approach me and say, Dan, we've got an incredible opportunity ahead of us, or we've just been hit by a tsunami. So the incredible opportunity, or what I call the lifetime opportunity. And I'd really like to have you sort of support us, to go along with us, because my work is not pulling people out for 2 weeks and sitting in a classroom. It's really working with them side by side while they're working their business issues. And that's the third issue, is like people get this huge opportunity, or they've been hit with something totally unexpected, and they'd like a set of outside eyes to help them. My work isn't about I don't come in with 20 or 30 consultants. You don't need a legion of consultants to transform your business. My belief is leaders and organizations today can transform their own business, but they need a little nuance, maybe a little support, maybe a little executive ownership to help them shift the small nuances that make a big difference in their business.
I love that. And you've created your own category in OWERSHIFT.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. I love that. Well, how do people find out more about you?
Well, the virtual community on LinkedIn, I enjoy that. I'm not doing Twitter and all these other things, but I do like LinkedIn. I like to read meaningful content, what people write, and I like to hear about people's stories and connect there. So that's one way. And the second way is through my website, where I do a newsletter and publish blogs, and people can also reach out. My phone number's on there, and I'm happy to talk to people about their issues and see if I can be of help to them.
Well, thank you so much. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah. Well, that was sort of a real labor of love. This idea is that over the last 10 years, I've worked with about over 100 leadership teams on 3 different continents, and I've learned so much from these talented people. I mean, it's really an honor to be able to support them and be asked to learn with them. And as I'm going through these processes, I realized that, first of all, for me, I wanted to write down and codify what were the experiences that these leaders were really having, and what did they have to do? What did they have to do right to be successful, and where did they often go wrong? And they were very open with me in doing that. And so the book was, first of all, for me to sort of collect these experiences. And then I thought, but that's a little bit selfish only to have for me. Although I go back to the book regularly, the book for me is like a handbook now, and I'm really into it because it's full of practical tools. But the second thing I thought, for other leaders that really believe that the leadership team is the engine for growth in their organization and sets the culture for the organization, they can also profit from this book. So I wrote it in a way that it's got very small case studies. The good ones, there's a whole bunch of guys in there that are portrayed who I worked with, their names are in there. I mean, top guys in Europe who really, really are doing it. And then there's also some stories about where things didn't go so right. There I sort of changed the names a little bit to protect the confidentiality. But the book is also full of tools. So if you're a leader driving a team, or you're maybe a consultant or coach supporting teams, or you're just interested in personal development, I think you'll find the book interesting because I've tried to write it in a story-like way. So there's some stories and metaphors that you can carry forward, and you can get it just about anywhere today. Thank
you so much. I thank you for sharing that. I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and as I've said before, but I mean it. There's no BS there. This is I truly appreciate what you're going through here, because I know you're helping a lot of organizations and helping a lot of people within the organizations, especially from the leadership perspective. And it sounds to me, or seems to me, that you're creating better lives for people, because I do not believe in work-life balance. I believe in life balance. Yeah. And we spend so much time in the office or at work. And so it's nice to be able to have, the organization that you can rely on from a leadership perspective, and have everybody on the same page. Wow, what a difference that is.
I mean, people deserve great leadership, and people deserve to lead at their best. And I think the team construct is a way to do it. And I'm just, first of all, thank you for your comments and your compliments coming. I mean, you're a very seasoned guy. You see a lot of people. I'm very grateful. And you're on my radar. You were on my radar, and I'm so honored to be with you, because what I appreciate about you is you're so deliberate in the way that you set up your culture and your organization. I mean, what I didn't see was you banging the drum saying, "Oh, I want to make $2 billion next year." What I do hear you beating the drum about is we want to be deliberate about our culture, our values. We want people that work with us that are a good fit. That really resonates with me. And so you keep sharing that good news and getting people to mirror what you're doing, Jamie. That's really, really cool.
You just made my day, Dan. that's
both our days.
That's what we love here. So is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap?
Well, again, thank you. And two things I would say is that, none of us are as smart as all of us. And Western society is often, it's about me and this. And yes, there's a certain degree of achievement that we all want to achieve. But if we're learning anything from watching the world around us, and I'm not just talking about the US, I'm talking about the world around us. We're on a small ball that's going around a star that's going to burn out sometime. Mars isn't going to be big enough for all of us. And I think it's important to remember that if we work together, if we really look to help and support each other, that's a way that can enhance all our days. And the second thing I would say is that, improvement is a continuous process, and improvement feels good. And part of my title is shift. And I chose shift, ownership, because shift also cognates a small change. And sometimes we underestimate what a small change can mean for our life and our relationships and our business. And we think, oh, that won't make a difference. Well, it does make a difference. You change 1% a day for 70 days, you've already doubled your effectiveness. So small changes are important. And remember your neighbor next to you. And those are my closing words.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you. I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate that. Do you have just a second to hold around for
Absolutely.
me to write it down? All right. Thank you so much. We've been talking with Dan Norenberg. I told you, I told you how awesome this was going to be. I just appreciate our conversation today. Dan is a leader in this industry, signature strengths of highly effective leadership teams. He's the CEO of Catalyst Executive OWERSHIFT. I cannot recommend enough to go check it out. You can learn more by visiting his website at Norenberg.com. He loves LinkedIn, so you can check out LinkedIn. And by all means, go check out his book. You can get it just about anywhere he says. And it's Executive OWERSHIFT, Creating Highly Effective Leadership Teams. Definitely go check that out. And a big thanks and hats off to Dan Norenberg all the way from Munich. So hopping on a little bit late for him in the evening, but we really appreciate it. Just a couple things real quick. We've launched live with Bottleneck. It's Bottleneck Television. You can go to bottleneck.online/TV or bottleneck.online/BTV for Bottleneck Television to learn more. And Quit Repeating Yourself is my new book. It's coming out in August. You can learn more and you can support us right now. As of the time of this recording, if you're watching it live, this is April 23rd through May 6th. We have an Indiegogo campaign there. And we're looking for your support to help get the book out on the shelves here in September. So hashtag Quit Repeating Yourself. Thank you so much for that. And coming soon, the wonderful duo Rockfelder and Zachariah Marino. They are the founders of Squadcast, an unbelievable platform. Many of you may know if you're into podcasting. I'm going to be talking with them Tuesday, April 27th at 2 p.m. Central. We're going to be discussing remote content production with Squadcast.fm. So without any further ado, I will go ahead and wrap. Remember, go ahead and create your own ripple. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great one.